This is funny because this is my favorite thing I've ever learned from Copilot work that we've done. And I kick myself because I'm like, how did we not do this for years? So the idea is really simple. When you have a Copilot deployment, remember, we're going to self-select a bunch of people and then roll this out. What we're going to then do is open up using a form, right? A SharePoint list, whatever, Microsoft list. You have a form, Microsoft form, that people can fill out, and it says, I have these people, 3 or more people, that have an interest in having access to Copilot for Microsoft 365. Here's our business reasoning and the ways that we intend to use it, as well as some additional information around, other insights. They give that information, and then either whitelisted as automatic acceptance and given the license, or through a really simple review process, they're then given access to Copilot. Now, this is really important for a few reasons. Number one, what this means is as you look at the broader community, right? Once we get outside of those couple, maybe 100 if you're a really large organization, or 50 or whatever people that are like those chosen champions, when you start to look across the organization for scale, the way you're scaling is with teams of people who have a shared purpose. They have something that they're trying to achieve with AI. They could be cross-functional teams, departmental teams, functional teams. You'll see a really interesting mix, by the way. And then because it's a mixture of people, 3 maybe to 10 or 12, you do want to limit the sizing. You don't want to be massive teams, because then that defeats the purpose. Now you can communicate to those teams. So instead of just doing traditional communication where we message each person, which we can still do, we also will make sure that the team has seen it. And we'll look at team-based analytics, like is that team, who's read it, who hasn't, who's received that message. When we ask for surveys, we see 100% survey fill rates very frequently because someone in that team responds and represents the team. In fact, we encourage them to each individually respond, but to make sure someone at least responds and that you all share those broader opinions. So those are things that we can encourage. We can even have 2 different processes for survey responses, and then slightly different survey models, and then that gives us even more data, more insights, more frequently, because again, you can actually ask a team to give you more frequent feedback than you might want to do it as an individual, and you don't have to chase as much because again, teams are quite good at managing responsibilities like that. The other thing that's really interesting with this team-based model is it's much easier to get success stories. So remember, I mentioned earlier, people are working and they're learning, aha moments are happening. It's much easier for them to share that with their little team. And because they shared it with that team, they could use Copilot very easily to convert that and make that shareable for the broader organization. So again, we're finding there's a lot more pack flow of insights and sharing and a celebration and all those things that happen with Copilot as a result of this. And then lastly, we all know learning, as I already mentioned, is very adaptive based on this team model because almost always these 3 or more people include lots of peers. In fact, that is what we were looking for when we do the evaluation of a lot of these team nominations. We do want to look for as many of these peer-based models as possible, because then it doesn't matter if this hierarchy of that unit manager has a bunch of adoption plans for their unit. The fact is that that's actually scaled through a variety of different functional or departmental teams, et cetera, within that unit. So really effective strategy. And why I say it's so daunting is I look at it and I'm like, why are, we do this now for Viva, like employee experience, everything we now pilot, we're like, of course we should use a team-based model. And maybe you've explored this before, but we had never seen it. And from an industry perspective, it's pretty relatively unknown as a model. And it just makes a huge, like when I say substantial difference, we're talking like 30 to 50% better ROI on adoption by just adapting this model. And I think we're only touching the light surface of this, because when we were starting to get into measures, which we'll talk about later, you have productivity measures, you have quality measures. We're starting to get into like collaborative measures, like how it affects the way people work together and the efficacy of that. And that is much more easy to get into the data and reporting with teams of people. So yes, teams is the way to go. Not Microsoft Teams, of course, they can support that, but these team-based champion models, very, very effective. And it's made us rethink our program. One last comment, I mentioned this for the technical teams, but it's also really easy to take away Copilot. From an individual, it's hard because it feels like you're talking about me. But from a team, you can say, look, your team, maybe you as an individual are doing great, but your team is they're not maximizing this tool set. And what we see is a lot of times when that does happen, you'll find that person goes and nominates a different team, which is actually pretty cool because then they share with that other team and now they're more committed to trying to make sure that whole team is uplifted than maybe they were in the initial set, because they understand there's a connection between the advantage they get with AI tools. They have to kind of benefit from it as a broader community. So again, shares the ownership, shares the responsibility and the benefits. Anyways, I won't get into the behavioral science stuff, but it's really neat the way this impacts things. All right. I also have a little checklist here. Just again, if you've never done a champion program in modern organizations, there's a lot of different things you can do. I think these are like baseline. There's so much more you can consider around efficacy of a team-based model. Like I really encourage like champions to be 2024 champions. Makes if you just have that symbol change, now it's much easier to say, oh, you're a 2025 champion because you've sustained that, or you rotate it out because you just didn't, you're not maintaining your champion status. This makes it really easy also to bring in new, fresh people. It doesn't set an expectation that you're always a champion. Also a problem because this is not a project. This is an exponential change that's happening over maybe decades. So it's really important to start planning for those things early. One last comment. Microsoft has some resources. I'm just going to highlight it. This is an external community. And so you can see, as an example, they have sort of ideas, background around champions, sample plans, etc. And then they have these courses around adoption, specialization, about 2 hours, 25 minutes. And there's more coming. I think this is great. I really appreciate, even if it's not an effective cert, it's a nice way to like at least internally certify and walk through this process. So I'm not saying you should adapt Microsoft's model, but having a pathway where people can kind of brand or celebrate their efficacy of a champion and like invest in it, I think is worthwhile, especially if you give them some perks or benefits on the other side.